attending council hearings in person. You tuned into our televised proceedings on Channel 13. Now you have the chance to listen to us on the radio as we demystify our work and the people who do it. This is not a council hearing. This is Hearing the Council with your host, Josh Gibson.
Thank you, deep voiced person with a funky backbeat. Indeed, this is not a council hearing. This is Hearing the Council. You can't have a government without a council, so you can't have a government radio station without a council show. This is it. I'm Josh Gibson, Director of Communications for the Council. You may also know me as our voice on social media at Council of DC. And I am very grateful to be again joined by at-large Councilmember Christina Henderson. Thank you so much, Councilmember, for being back.
Good to see you, Josh.
And I generally open up the topic of the interviews to the council members. And I always encourage them, if there's a thing that you can't get traditional media to talk about because it's too wonky or whatever, it's not in the headlines, bring it to me and we'll have a great chance and we'll have a half hour to talk about important things that might not catch, the immediate glossy, shiny object attention that the media sometimes wants. And you did a great job. You sent over a number of bills that are critically important and that I haven't seen get the attention they deserve in the media. So why don't we kind of jumpstart the attention by focusing on them now? Okay. We're gonna have to do a bit of a speed round. We have 30, 40 minutes, but I want to get through as many of these as we can and leave time for the fun round at the end. So first of all, today was the first meeting of the Opioid Abatement Advisory Commission. So, and you serve on that commission, and you introduced the bill, State of the Council, and sent to the council declaring that there was an opioid crisis in the district. So let's start with that profoundly serious topic. Can you tell me a bit about the meeting from earlier today and what the district's doing and where we go from here?
Yeah, so a lot of people in their sort of understanding of the opioid crisis actually goes back pre-pandemic. There has also been a number of movies and made-for-TV series around what happened across the country, particularly from prescription opioids, that led to a number of folks who were now experiencing substance abuse disorders and then subsequent deaths as related to that. In the district, our opioid crisis is a little bit different. As opposed to prescription drugs being sort of the driving factor, ours is around other harder substances, primarily fentanyl. About 98 to 99% of the opioid related deaths in the district right now have fentanyl as the chief culprit of the issue. And we've just seen the rising numbers, especially since 2014 here in the district. So in 2014, DC saw about 84 opioid-related fatalities. Last year, we lost 461 lives to opioids. And the numbers that we're seeing in 2023, we are likely to see an increase again this year in terms of the opioid-related deaths. Now, that's just deaths. When we look, we zoom out even further to look at opioid-related calls that didn't necessarily result in opioids. This past fiscal year, we just got the numbers from FEMS. We had over 5,200 calls for suspected overdoses in the district. 5,200. If you think about that from these are the number of calls that FEMS, EMT, showing up in our hospitals, MPD is responding to, that is significant. DC right now ranks #1 in the country in terms of overdoses. #1 per capita here in the nation's capital. And I felt like not a lot of people were talking about this, and it was sort of getting lost in the conversation overall around what has been happening in terms of crime. And it's of my opinion that some of our opioid-related issues and our drug-related issues are very much closely related to the crime trends that we're seeing in the district at this particular stage. So myself, along with many of my colleagues, we introduced a legislation, a sense of a council resolution, calling on the mayor to declare that the opioid crisis in the district has reached a public health emergency status that allows for some flexibility in terms of procurement and contracting so that we can get resources out on the street to individuals in a faster manner to try to address this crisis and blunt it where it is. Related to some of the opioid challenges from years ago, where a number of states sued pharmaceutical companies and distributors who played a role in the growing number of individuals who were addicted to opioids. The district has been part of 9 settlements. So settlement with Purdue Pharma, settlement with, some of these other companies. And so we're expected to receive approximately $80 million by 2039. That is supposed to be specifically set aside to address the opioid epidemic and crisis. One of the things before we can spend that money, we had to set up a commission. And the commission's charge is to provide recommendations on how that money is supposed to be spent. So we finally had our first meeting. The commission has been sworn in and set, and I'm really excited for us to get to work.
And is that money locked in? Is that money in a lockbox, or like a lot of other money that's set aside for targeted uses? Is there a danger that it could be pilfered for other uses within government?
That's always a challenge. I think the thing that people think back to are tobacco settlement monies. So years ago, states, again, they sued tobacco companies for getting people addicted to nicotine and the effects of that. Well, when you look back on how jurisdictions spent their tobacco settlement money, lots of it was siphoned off for other things. I would say probably, I think someone said less than 5% of the money actually went to helping individuals who were struggling with nicotine addiction. And so we're trying to make sure that the opioid abatement fund is not a similar situation. But as with anything, the mayor and the legislature or a governor and a legislature can make a decision around, okay, we're going to waive this and we're going to do something different. We saw earlier this year where in the mayor's proposed budget, the money that was already deposited into the fund, the mayor had proposed sweeping it and putting it into the general fund for other purposes. We caught that and reversed it very quickly. And I feel fairly strongly that this attorney general, who we've been working very closely with the opioid abatement commission and settlement funds, is going to stay on top of it to make sure that we're not having a same situation that we faced with tobacco.
Why do you think it is that, with fatalities being at least the double of what sadly we'll see with homicides, that this does not get attention from the media or the public when this is an epidemic of double those proportions, tragically?
I think it goes into perhaps society's feelings around individuals who are struggling with substance abuse disorder or co-occurring disorders, right? This feeling of, well, you're making a choice. Well, if you wanted to seek treatment options are available to you. And so it feels very different than perhaps other types of fatalities that we see where it wasn't, quote unquote, someone's choice. There has been a lot of, for decades, shame associated with individuals who have addiction issues. I think most people probably have someone in their family or someone in their life who they know has struggled in some part with addiction. And if you think about it, that person is sort of the black sheep. You don't really talk about it. Everybody knows that it's a situation, but it's not something that's on the hot topic. And I feel like that's perhaps some of the approach here. And it's also too, people not necessarily understanding that addiction is a disease that requires treatment in the same way that other diseases require treatment as well. But I'm hopeful that with more people talking about substance abuse disorders and opioids and addiction, that we are approaching this issue with a lot more compassion and therefore are willing to have more open and honest conversations, not only about the crisis at hand and the data of what it shows, but also some solutions for us to help address the issue and keep people alive.
And I'm guessing that there's also a bit of a demographic piece that, as you mentioned, the rest of America, if it was pharmaceutical abuse, it was maybe more cross-cutting demographically and income-wise, whereas I know in the district, it's very focused from an income and a demographic standpoint, and there's not enough attention or sympathy on victims with those defining demographics and income characteristics.
I mean, you bring up a very excellent point. I think that when everyone was sort of talking about Purdue Pharma, Oxycontin, and those kinds of things, and you had a lot of senators or members of Congress from traditionally red areas all of a sudden talking about, well, we need to treat addiction as a public health issue. There were definitely some folks in urban areas who were like, wait. When we were talking about addiction around crack and heroin in urban areas, we treated it as though it was a criminalization issue, right? The war on drugs, war on crime, locking people up, mandatory minimums. It was not in the same approach. And I don't think we've necessarily grappled with when one was sort of affecting a largely white population, which is prescription drugs, but we're dealing with, scheduled substances. It's affecting primarily people of color. You're absolutely right. Feelings and moods have changed. And I also feel, though, like from the government standpoint, we have a responsibility to acknowledge that in the past it was done incorrectly, and then we need to do something very different. I will say here in DC, what also makes our crisis a bit more unique is a demographic of individuals who are struggling with this. So in other areas, it's, folks in their 20s that they might have an issue with, or folks in their 30s. What we are seeing from the fatality report numbers, 75% were male, 84% were Black, and the majority fell in the age group of 50 to 69. Right. And so when I usually tell people that, like, wait, 50 to 69, yes. So we are dealing with, in these cases, when we're talking about 50 to 69, we are dealing with individuals who have actually been living with their addiction for a very long time. And perhaps they haven't done anything different themselves, but what did change was the drug supply. The drug supply went from, a very small percentage of issues around fentanyl, and now pretty much everything in the district has fentanyl as part of it. So I think you raised an excellent point.
Okay, I spoke about having a busy agenda and pivoting, so we could spend a whole show on opioids, but I'm going to pivot to other pieces of legislation that are in process. We'll go to two that are on food. One is the Give SNAP a Raise bill, which was already passed, is already law, and unexpectedly found funding recently. I want to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
And the other one is your proposal for universal free school meals.
Yes.
So take those in whatever order you want, and we'll get to both of them.
Yeah. So we passed the Give SNAP a Raise bill officially earlier this year, and it was unfunded. Mainly, it was a price tag issue. I'll just be very honest with you. What we were trying to do for folks who are listening is to increase the local contribution for SNAP beneficiaries, especially given that pandemic emergency allotments had expired from Congress. So we had heard from lots of constituents who had been receiving extra money for the last 3 years that their benefits are no longer lasting as long as they need it to. Their food insecurity issues are definitely skyrocketing. And then also, increasing number of individuals who are entering poverty as a result. You add not having enough benefits or purchasing power, and then add inflation and the rising cost of food. It was sort of coming together. So Give SNAP a Raise would provide a 10% increase to all SNAP beneficiaries, which amounts to about an average beneficiary would receive around $47 increase in their SNAP benefits. Although we weren't able to pay for all of it in the budget, Councilmember Lewis George led the charge on an amendment to basically say, if revenues later this year, so that would have been September, if revenues exceed projections, that money would be dedicated in part to giving SNAP a raise, as well as providing direct assistance to excluded workers. Well, lo and behold, on a nice Friday night, we get the CFO's revenue estimates, and it turns out we have the funding to be able to give SNAP a raise. It's one-time money, so we still have to work on making it permanent. But if all goes well, beginning in January, over 140,000 SNAP beneficiaries in the District of Columbia are going to see an increase in their benefits. So we're really, really excited about that, and are really just working to make that more permanent. In terms of universal free meals.
Let's pause there.
Okay.
We'll come back to it, just so I can hit you on a couple of questions. We can never remind people enough how little money comes with SNAP.
Yes.
I think it starts at $40 a week, $1.16 a meal. That is, to people that sadly go out and spend $6, $7, $8 a day on coffee. We can't remind people enough of how low these benefits are. But having said that, how far the raise will go. To talk a little bit about that. I mean, how can we reinforce with people that these benefits are so meager and so in need of help?
Yeah. When I worked on the Hill, Senator Booker did, like, I think it was called like the SNAP challenge. And so it was a challenge for members to essentially live on what a SNAP beneficiary would live on for a week. And he talked about, I had enough for rice and beans and, a tomato and some potatoes, right? Like, he was talking about the fact that when you think about, and this was, 4 or 5 years ago. So when you think about the cost of food and how you make that stretch, he's one person, a grown person, but one person, when you're trying to make it stretch for a full family, it just really doesn't go that far. And the unfortunate thing, I feel like, with comes to SNAP, TANF, WIC, all of these direct supplemental assistance programs, unfortunately for decades, it's gotten this bad rap of people assuming that, they're living large, buying seafood and steaks and not working, and, the welfare queen sort of narrative, if you will. But when I explain to people, like, the average SNAP recipient is getting maybe like $150 to last them what is supposed to be an entire month, then it starts to hit people like, whoa, how is that possible? And we see that play out in grocery stores across the city all the time, and not even just across the city, but across the country, in areas where you have high numbers of individuals who are using, benefit assistance programs to help them out. The first 2 months of sales for supermarkets in those areas are really great. They're really strong, gangbusters. In fact, for many grocery stores, they schedule sales on those first 2 weeks to help, again, get people to help maximize their purchasing power. The final 2 weeks of a month is scarce, usually because the benefits are gone. And so now people are just waiting for the next month before they can go out and do grocery shopping again. And I would just want people to sort of think about how they consume things, how they, and I have 2 toddlers, so, we go through a fair amount of milk in my house. I don't buy milk once a month. Usually is having to buy milk every week. If you think about the cost of eggs, or even lately, not necessarily healthy for some people, but the cost of bacon. I don't know if you looked at the cost of bacon lately. It was like $9, like a container.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't even have the decency to have great packaging, right? Like, that helps to keep it fresh across the board. So, I try to remind people that we're not talking about a lot individually, especially when you're talking about feeding a family of 4 on those benefits.
Yeah, and so we're talking about a bump of $47 a month. It really is just so little, but it will be so gratefully received, and will go so far. Before we leave this point, the CFO, work with me on this analogy. If you're a weatherman and you're
Okay.
predicting snow, you always have to predict more snow than you're going to get. Because if you predict an inch of snow and we get 12, the city shuts down. It's a disaster and people never forget your error. With the CFO, he is always going to underpredict revenues, because if he ever overpredicts revenues,
We have a problem.
things will go to hell.
Yes.
He has additional benefit that if he underpredicts revenues, all of a sudden he has big fans on the council and in the mayor's office that are thrilled this additional money has shown up that we get to spend. How do you deal with the moral hazard? Something tells me that if we said to the CFO, for every % you're off, we're going to dock your pay, he would come up with a different revenue number than the one he has to come up with, given the moral hazard of if he tries to guess accurately but gets it wrong, he's going to get burned and roasted. Respond to that.
I would say this, and I feel like I've gotten several lectures of this from the folks who do revenue forecasting and analysis for the CFO's office, is that it is a science and an art combined. And they would rather you have more money on the back end than we not have enough, and then we have to go cut. To cut in the middle of a fiscal year is a painful process, because now you have individuals who might have already filled out a grant application, or, you know, community-based organizations who are relying on this additional funding, and now you have to cut, or you have to cut staff after they've already started working, or those kinds of things. And so I don't know, I'm okay with my CFO being a bit more on the conservative side. I like balanced budgets. We're required to do them by law. I do feel like there are a lot of sometimes variable and complicated inputs that kind of go into the forecasting that we can't always predict well. I can't always predict how many people are going to buy or sell homes in the district at any given time. It is hard for us to kind of know, you know, what's going to happen from a transportation standpoint, and are we going to see more people on WMATA? Are we going to see more people on the roads? Right. It's just I've just sort of learned from them that it's more complicated than perhaps people give credit for. But I'm certainly not one who gets outraged every time that, you know, revenues have exceeded projections. This particular year, it was a welcome surprise, because I'm not going to lie to you. When we passed that amendment earlier this year, I didn't actually think that we would meet the threshold for the trigger, because of what the economic outlook had been for the district, particularly around commercial real estate and what was happening economically downtown. The fact that we did do better than expected kind of gives me a little bit of hope that perhaps, you know, the doom and gloom expectations around recessions and the bottom falling out is just not going to happen or occur here. But yeah, count me as one who's like, yeah, no, I don't want my CFO to be liberal, so liberal in their assessments that we are forced to cut more than we have an opportunity to allocate new revenue.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a science and an art, like meteorology. Just I can't think of it other than those two jobs where you're paid to guess something, but if you get wrong in one direction, you get in trouble, and if you guess wrong in the other, you don't as much. So,
well, I mean, if you think about it, though, for like weathermen, right, this is like the one profession where you can be wrong 99% of the time and still keep your job.
True.
It's all about predictability, right? It's or probability. So there's that.
True. Okay, so let's pivot now to universal free school meals. Tell us about the bill. Because unlike the SNAP bill, which is law and which is now surprisingly, like you said, funded, the free meals bill is still a proposal, is still working its way through the council.
Yeah. So universal free school meals is basically to make something that we did during the pandemic permanent, which is right now we have a bifurcated system. So we have some students who pay full price. We have some students who pay reduced price for lunch and breakfast. And then we have some students who are free. This would basically say in the district, we are just going to cover breakfast, lunch, and snack for everyone, regardless of income status. And it has a lot of different benefits to it. So first, we do have some families who are on the edge. in terms of eligibility qualifications. So you wouldn't consider yourself upper class or having a great amount of disposable income, but you're just above the threshold to, qualify for free or reduced lunch. And therefore now you're having to pay the full amount, which puts an additional strain on your family. Lots of people have heard the stories around like the quote unquote lunch debt, the idea that we have students who are taking on debt over square pizzas and applesauces, to me is just ridiculous. And so I feel like this is a small, it's a minor investment of dollars in order for us to have a very large impact, because we talk about food insecurity and hunger in terms of what that does to a family. We also talk about what does hunger do to a student's brain and their ability to pay attention and focus in class. I know for me, when I'm hungry, it's very hard for me to focus on anything else, or to listen to a meeting or follow a lecture or those kinds of things. Imagine if you're 7 or 8 and the last meal you had was at 7 o'clock before you came to school. You don't have lunch money, you don't qualify for lunch, and now you have to essentially wait until you get home. That's a long time, and what that does to someone's brain function. And so we have a hearing scheduled for universal free meals, free school meals, and I'm really hopeful that this is something we can get done in the budget this upcoming year.
And also, a very high percentage of DC students already get free and reduced meals.
Yeah.
So for that little sliver that's not getting it, that's not getting free or reduced, and the people that are getting reduced to get free, it just seems like from an administrative standpoint,
It is
just
much
not worth it.
easier. It is so much easier for the administration of the school lunch and breakfast program when everybody was just getting free. And 9 states have already passed similar legislation. I get a little jealous every time I see a governor doing a bill signing on this, because I'm like, this could be the district. And frankly, it will cost us less than everybody else to make this happen because of our size. Why haven't we done it yet?
And because we have such a high percentage of people getting free and reduced lunch to start with.
Already,
I mean,
yes.
if you take be universal and you're at a low percent, then there's bigger cost.
Yeah.
And then the other benefit is the cost is already fairly low. It's $8 million a year in the first year, but 86% of that will be federally funded. Which, if I did the math right, it's 1.12 million. Will be our.
Well, it's from federal reimbursement. But we actually will probably be asking for a new FIS estimate here. So 8 million was what we thought about early, or what we were told earlier this year. In the intervening time, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the USDA, which manages the school lunch program, they've put out new rules and regs around what's known as the community eligibility provision. So the CEP basically says, or had said, if 40% of your students were participating in free or reduced meals, then the entire school can just be considered part of the program. And so we had a number of schools that were already participating in the CEP program. The new regulations that was just put out, finalized from USDA, lowers the threshold from 40 to 25. So if 25% of your students are receiving free reduced lunch, you are eligible for community eligibility. And we feel like by the lowering of the threshold to 25, we will have almost, I would say, a smooth 90% of our schools, if we're talking about both DCPS and public charter schools, who will likely qualify for CEP. Which means then that the district's cost is only for that remaining 10% who don't. That's that again, it's a small number. We haven't done the calculation yet, but we're really excited.
Even schools, it's just the percentage within those schools that are not already paying for free lunch.
Correct.
So it's
So
90%.
Yeah. So right now, 85% of schools in the district are a CEP. So when you lower the threshold to 25, we probably actually will do better than 90. But nonetheless, the point being is that I will say this. If we do not pass this bill and have the funding in order for this to be in place for school year 24-25, that will be because we've made a policy choice not to do it, not because there was no funding available or that it was too hard. And that would be a really, really sad disappointment for the kids of the district.
Yeah, I mean, what would the basis be for that policy decision?
In the same
Conceivably-
vein that, like, Congress got rid of what we were doing during the pandemic, which was allowing for this very broad eligibility around CEP, because Republicans felt like, oh, well, kids need to pay in order to learn accountability. Yes, I need, again, a 6-year-old to take on debt for, square pizza and chocolate milk. That makes no sense. If we proclaim ourselves to be a world superpower and, the country for which everyone else should envy and admire or look up to, then we got to do better on our end.
Right. Well, we had 2 other topics that we're going to save for the next episode, 2 healthcare related bills that I researched and would love to talk about. But if we're going to have time for the fun round, which I insist on,
I
we-
insist on that too, because you always come up with questions.
so it's a 2-parter this time because this is sort of our Halloween episode, because I'm not doing another episode before Halloween.
Okay.
And you are the mastermind behind the council's pumpkin carving contest.
I am.
Which is the 2nd annual one, is going to be opening next week. And I actually have a prop for this.
Okay.
So stay with me for the prop.
Okay.
Dry ice. Okay, so with this in the background, talk to me about the pumpkin carving contest.
So we did the pumpkin carving contest last year as a twofer. One, we had a lot of staff across the council who were new to the council and who didn't know each other. And we we used to have socialization all the time, or at least when I was a staffer on the council. And so this was just an opportunity for folks to get to know each other and have some fun and get into the holiday spirit. I was born in October, so Halloween is one of my favorite holidays, and I feel like, it really kicks off fall. And so we're bringing it back again. And I'm hoping, well, and also we have a very competitive group of
Yes.
council members and staff. And so it's just gonna be a really fun afternoon activity. I myself have already purchased my pumpkin, and I've got some ideas in my head, and so I'm gonna be entering as well next week.
And do you remember who won last year?
Yes, the budget office won last year for their scary pumpkin that was eating a budget. It was
Yeah, they had legislative shreds in its mouth, and
yes.
Yeah. So
yes.
okay, I want credit for the prop, but I'm going to put the prop down.
Oh yeah. Are you going to be using dry ice for your pumpkin next week?
No, it's a long story. We had it around the house and I figured this was a good opportunity. So the actual fun round is, and I've tried this once before, but it's a Frankenstein themed thing. So I think it makes sense to do it today.
Okay.
What I want you to do, I want you to come up with a good and a bad Frankenstein council member. I want you first to build a perfect council member, the good parts, out of the traits and the skills of your colleagues. Like if you were going to build a perfect council member, you would pick the intellect of name a person, the sense of humor. Basically, it's a chance to pull kind of your favorite traits from your colleagues and put them together into one superpower council member who could take on the world.
I thought this was like Halloween themed.
Well, Frankenstein, it's you've used up all my other fun closing rounds, so I'm bringing this one back.
Okay.
Or alternately, you can also pick, if you want to create the worst council member ever, you would take, the sense of humor from a famously not funny council member. But no one ever do the bad version because that's insulting. But name some traits you would pick from your colleagues to give to a council member who you think would be a quality council member.
Oh man. I mean, everybody brings a little something different to the table.
That's the concept. Phil Mendelssohn's fashion sense, It's
Wait,
something like
am I doing best or worst?
it's up to you. You can pick. I'm just trying to get your, get you thinking.
Get my juices flowing. Okay,
Yes.
I'll do like a good. So let's see. I would so Janice has a good sense of humor. We sit next to each other and we get in trouble a lot because of said humor. And so I would take Janice's humor,
Okay.
combine that with Charles's like analytical brain,
Okay.
like sort of process. Anita's ability to sort of see a larger picture, which is good. Brooke's ability to kind of synthesize information and say, like, what I think I'm hearing multiple people say is the following, and like sort of giving, that piece. I would take Zachary's energy because he's always everywhere. Um, Brienne's baking skills, but that's not really a council part, but we always need somebody who's going to take care to like make sure, hey, did you eat? Hey, did you like drink water? Do all of those pieces, which is good. Yeah. Yeah.
That seems like a good start.
It's yeah.
And you're not going to stick your neck out on even a single negative trait that if you wanted to create the worst council member in the world, you would take.
Well, I mean,
X
Phil thinks himself is hilarious, and no one ever laughs at his jokes ever. And
I laugh, and not just because I indirectly work for him.
Right.
He's
There's usually like this long silence when he feels like he has made like a strong punchline, and that I would say he probably has like the worst joke ability of everybody.
I feel like he's a bit in the Bob Dole, Al Gore. Like everyone assumes he's very dry and boring, and that if something funny comes out, which it usually does, even with Dole and Gore, you're kind of like you get an extra benefit when it does work because it's unexpected.
Yes.
That's how I would charitably describe it. But anyway, I'll continue my effort to create an evil, flawed council member made out of all the bad parts of the other council members. But you guys you don't bite on that one. No one has. But I appreciate the effort. Sadly, we're beyond time.
Okay.
But thank you, for humoring my silly Halloween theme. And definitely, I do want to have you back to talk about the other two bills. It just, we couldn't have done them justice today. But listeners, remember to subscribe to our podcast on SoundCloud or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search under Hearing the Council. Thanks again, Councilmember, for joining us. Thank you, listeners. Tune in again next time. We're on DC Radio at 96.3 on your FM HD4 dial or at dcradio.gov. I'm Josh Gibson. This is not a council hearing. This is Hearing the Council. Happy Halloween. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Take care. Bye-bye.